1, 2, 3, go. Today we're going to talk about a concept called light ratio. What I was doing just now was to shoot a model and reach the 1-to-1 light ratio. The subject's face was fair. She jumped in a good mood, accompanied by amusing music, making our whole shooting a very relaxing and cheerful process. What we're going to talk about today has a lot to do with a parameter, which is the most primary and most basic parameter, called the aperture. What is the aperture? Aperture equals to how much the light hole of the lens opens, and it is used to control the light and shade effect. When we take a picture, we're actually adjusting the light and shade of the picture. Before we introduce the light ratio, let's take a closer look at what coefficients the aperture has. When we talk about the aperture parameters, we will see that the aperture has a series of irregular data corresponding to a series of full-stop apertures, such as 5.6, 8.0, 11, 16, 22, and so on. It plays a decisive role for us to take photos. Smaller values represent less amount of light intake, and larger values represent more amount of light intake, for which the light ratio come about. What is the light ratio? The light ratio is essentially a certain ratio presenting the changes between light and shade. Here, we define the light ratio according to a series of parameters, such as 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 4-to-1, 8-to-1, and so on. To define the light, different light effects have different light ratios. In layman's terms, the light ratio is what makes the picture brighter or darker. Strictly speaking, it should be defined according to a series of light ratio values. Understanding the light ratio allows us as photographers to better understand the light and the contrast between light and shade. Light ratio is the contrast between light and shade that is created when we adjust the light and shade. I'll turn the modeling light in the flash lamp, and let's see how the light changes in the model's face. When there are more than one light in a picture, the contrast between lights will show. The contrast between light and shade will use the value of light ratio to define the contrast between light and shade. When a photographer is observing an image, if he is experienced, he can feel the change of light ratio in the image. When we work on a client's project, the script's preset will tell the photographer what the contrast is in the image. In other words, it means the light ratio that determines the change of light and shade in the picture. When the photographer can accurately grasp the effect of the light ratio, then he can fully meet the client's needs of the picture effect. Therefore, knowing, understanding, and familiarizing with the light ratio can make us shoot more professionally and help us quickly grow into a professional photographer. So what is the relationship between aperture and light ratio that I just mentioned? What I just mentioned, 1-to-1, 2-to-1, or 4-to-1, 8-to-1, the ratio of lights are the light changes caused by the increasing or decreasing aperture. Each level changes according to the concept of the full stop of aperture. Let me repeat. A series of apertures of 5.6, 8, 11, 16, 22, etc. constitute different levels of light ratio. What we have demonstrated in the amusing music was a 1-to-1 light ratio created by the equal light by the left and right light. So from this photo I just took, we can feel that the lighting on the left and the right of the model are the same. So like this, we can see a smooth transition on her face. That's how we make a 1-to-1 light ratio. The aperture value on the left and on the right are the same, so we can create such an effect. And based on such an effect, we can see other light ratios. First, let's see a 2:1 light ratio and how it shows in a photo. Okay, let's see how the 2:1 light ratio works in a photo. For a 2:1 light ratio, there will be some difference between the lighting from the light side and the shade side. A 2:1 light ratio also means that there is a 2 times difference of aperture. So let's use a light meter to take an effective control over the lighting. When we talk about the light meter, we should know that we have to use the correct measuring method. First, place the light meter close to the subject and get to the corresponding position from the light so that we can perform effective measurement. During the process, we should also notice that if there are 2 or 3 lights during the shooting, different lighting will affect each other. So we must try to avoid other lighting during the measurement. For example, if we are measuring this light, we can use our hands to block some of the light. Where to block? On the spot where other lighting does not reach. For example, here, so that we can perform an effective measurement. Okay, when we get a value, we can then get to measure the other side. Okay, now we get another value. And now, the value we get from the left side is 11, and the value from the right side is 8. So, the difference is 1 complete grade of aperture. So here, we can feel that it is a 2:1 light ratio. Let's see how this plays out. Okay, turn your body a bit. Okay, get ready. 1, 2, 3. Great. Okay, we chose one of the photos. The hair feels very dynamic. And here we can see there are some slight changes on the left side and the right side of the subject. What causes the difference between light and shade is the 1 grade of aperture difference of the left and the right, which is a 2:1 light ratio. Now let's see some other light and shade effects and how the light ratio is expressed. Now let's make another light ratio. One with bigger contrast, an 8:1 light ratio. An 8:1 light ratio for a photo means 3 grades of aperture difference. So now let's take a measurement for such an effect. Okay, we are also using the blocking method to measure the light on the other side. Okay, now we've measured the light on the left side to be 22, and this side is 8. So it's 3 grades of difference. Let's check out the photography effect. Okay, raise your hand a bit and put that hand down, right? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Look at the camera. From the 8:1 effect, we can see that the light and shade contrast on the photo is being gradually intensified. The left of her face is in shade. But the 8:1 light ratio is not enough to achieve a complete dark shade. There are still a series of details for us to feel it. This is how the 8:1 light ratio effect looks like in the photo. Now let's make another more extreme example, the 16:1 light ratio. Now we are trying a more extreme light ratio. The 16:1 light ratio, it is very rarely used in our daily photography because the light and shade contrast is fairly large. We must be very careful using the 16:1 light ratio. Still, let's follow that pattern to measure the aperture. A 16:1 light ratio means a difference of 4 grades. Okay. Now, let's take a measurement. The lighting we measured is 5.6, and the other one we just measured is 22. So it's 4 grades of aperture difference, meaning it's a 16:1 light ratio. When we do the 16:1 light ratio, I used a piece of black velvet because when I was completing the 16:1 light ratio effect, the light and the shade could not reach a 16:1 contrast. So I have to use a piece of black cloth to absorb some of the light. Now let's look at the effect on the photo. Okay, turn around a little. Nice. Put your hands here. Look at the camera. Look here. Turn this side and let me see. Okay. Eyes at the camera. Okay. Be angry. Frown. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now let's take a look. From the 16:1 light ratio effect, we can clearly see that the right half of her face is completely in the shade. Through a contrast between extreme light and extreme shade, we can see the effect of the 16:1 light ratio. It is true that we don't use the 16:1 ratio quite often in our daily shooting, but it does bring us a huge contrast. And through such contrast, we can see a different transition from the light to the shade. So we have talked about the different effects achieved by the 2:1 light ratio, the 8:1 light ratio, and the 16:1 light ratio from our demonstrations. Understanding the light ratio will help you better master the light and become a professional photographer.